Hi guys, welcome back to part 3 of the tutorial series for HTML5 and CSS3 basics, building a portfolio. So in the last episode we got through the about content, we got through all that kind of setup, all the layout on there, did all the code for that. And on this part of the series we'll be moving on to the portfolio section. So there's a little bit more in depth with the kind of JavaScript in this section. We'll look at how kind of the modals are working, we'll build the styling for the modals, we'll talk through the JavaScript. So this one's a bit more in depth, a bit more interesting, so stay tuned and we'll jump straight into the code. Before we get started with this video, I'd like to take the opportunity to quickly plug the platform that I've created, Luupro. Luupro is a platform for you to get social about the projects you're working on. You can create new projects and share regular updates during project progression, as well as follow your favourite creators and view a feed of their updates. Unlike other portfolio platforms, Luupro is about sharing the entire journey of a project, from concept to completion, not just the final product at the end. Luupro is the perfect place for you guys to get social about the projects you're working on, and it's entirely free to use and you can get started at luupro.com. Hi guys, welcome back to the next part of the tutorial. So this part of the tutorial we're going to be working on the portfolio section. So this section is a little bit more in depth, nothing major, but we've got some kind of more interesting hover effects, and we've also got some the modal to contend with when it comes to each portfolio item. So when you click on each portfolio item, it brings up the relevant modal with a nice larger image of the project. So most of this is done with JavaScript in terms of the modal. It's done with JavaScript, which we've already written, but what I will do is I'll talk you through it like I said last time. So basically what we need to do is we need to do the styling for the grid and the hover effects, and we also need to do the styling for the modal as well, but the actual pop-up functionality when we click on it is already covered, but yeah, like I said, we'll go through that. So let's go back to the code screen. And let's get started with the markup then for the portfolio section. So we're going to make another section below here, and we're going to call that, we're going to give it a class and nav section, and we're going to give it a class ID of portfolio. So we add a hashtag to that then. We're going to use our reusable container as we've done last time. And then we are going to add another section header that again we did the global styles for last time. We're going to have a H3 with a class of heading. It's going to be portfolio inside the text. H4 with a class of subheading. And that's going to have the check out my work written inside there. So that's our heading sorted for the section. And then we kind of got to start the markup now for the portfolio grid and the portfolio items. So we've already got all of the images for that, and they're in the starter template, which is again downloaded from the GitHub, repo, so you can find all those images there. So basically, we just need to do the markup now for each one of those items. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a class, a div with the class of portfolio grid. So this is going to contain our portfolio items. Then we're going to make another item, which is another div with the class of portfolio item for the relevant item. And then we are going to, in fact, on the portfolio item as well, we're going to add an ID with the content of item 1. So it's going to tell. This is basically there for the JavaScript to tell it which item it's opening up on the modal when the portfolio item is clicked. So inside that portfolio item, we're going to have an image wrapper. And then we are going to pull in the portfolio items now. So if we, for the source of the image, we're going to make an image element, and inside the source of the image, it's going to be portfolio item 1, and we're going to add an alt tag of portfolio item 1. The alt tag ideally would be something better describing what's in the image, but for now we'll just add a portfolio item 1 is relevant enough for us. So what we're going to do is we've got 6 portfolio items, so we're going to just copy and paste this element here all the way down. In fact, I do believe actually we can remove this ID of item 1 on here. Yeah, we don't actually need that. I thought the JavaScript needed that, but that was an old version. We've got a slightly different version. So we're going to copy and paste this portfolio item 6 times. So 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we've got to do the tedious task of changing all the items over. So we're going to change this to, so just in case you're wondering, we've got the items imported here. Obviously there's no styling on them, so they're huge at the moment. It's all the same image, so we need to go around and change each one to, so that's portfolio item 2, this one's 3, this one is 4, This one is 5. And this one is 6. So if we scroll down here, we can see that each image is now different, and we got all the portfolio items. So that's pretty much the HTML markup done for this section. For the kind of the portfolio section, we do need to do some markup for the modal. We'll do that in a second. Though what we'll do for now is we'll concentrate on the styles for the section. So let's head to our style sheet. We're going to go scroll down to the bottom again, and we're going to make a new comment for the portfolio section to tell us that we started our portfolio styles. And to begin with, on a mobile display, we're going to add a padding of 100 pixels to the top and bottom of the portfolio section when we're on mobile displays. And then we can move straight into the portfolio grid. So the portfolio grid is the parent element that contains, so portfolio grid here is the parent element that contains all of the portfolio items. So what we're going to use for portfolio grid is we're going to give it a display of grid. So this is a fairly new in today's, fairly new, but a few years old now. Grid has been around, but it's kind of newish. So some tutorials, some older tutorials, you might not have seen display grid. It came out with Flex. So Flex and Grid are kind of the newer CSS properties that give us a lot of flexibility to our layouts. So with this display of grid, what we're going to do is we're going to give it, we can give the grid, we can give it a kind of a template to know how many columns we want in our grid. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in grid template columns. And what we can do in here is we can put repeat, and we can basically tell, we can put a repeat element in there. We can tell them how many items we want in our grid. So if we want a row of 4 items, we would put 4 here. And if we wanted them to be equal, we could put 1 FR. So that FR stands for fraction. So it'd be 1 fraction. So they all take up an equal amount of space. They all take up 1 fraction of the width. So if I click save, on this now, why does that not work then? Portfolio grid, display grid. Okay, so our image elements are far too big at the moment. That's why it has worked. It's just deceiving because our image elements are huge. So let's quickly then, let's just, for now, this is going to be temporary. We're just going to add a width of 100% because at the moment they're large images, so they're stretching out of their container. So if we see here, we've now got 4 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do display block here as well. Yeah, perfect. So put display block on the image. That just removed that little. If I go back to 100%, you can see there was a little gap here, and that's because the image is getting inline blocks. To get rid of that little black block, we can just add display block on there, and now they're all lined up properly. So you can see that we've made a grid layout. Obviously, it's too small, but it's just kind of for demonstration. We've got a grid layout with 4 elements in there. It's 6 elements in there with rows of 4. So let's actually work it down to 3 so it's equal. This is just for demonstration purposes. We're going to actually do our proper styling for smaller sizes and whatnot in a minute. So what we can do with grid as well, which is brilliant, is you can add a grid gap. And that will basically allow for perfect sizing in between every single element, which is perfect. You don't have to worry about the first children having a side kind of a kind of gap on the side as well. It just does it in between each element, which is brilliant. So our grid layouts allow us to make grid elements like this super easy and super quickly, which is perfect. But obviously, we were talking previously about when we talked about our kind of layouts. We talked about how we're doing a mobile first ethos. We're following that kind of ethos. So we did all of our code to begin with is mobile first, and we add all the other stuff in the media queries. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to put, for mobile sizes, we just want one image in a row for mobile sizes. So we're going to put repeat of 1 FR, which allows it just 1 image across the width on mobile sizes. We're going to increase the grid gap to 20 pixels. So that puts a nice gap between our all of our elements. And then I think what we'll do is we'll do the media queries now for the grid early on to show you kind of what the grid's going to look like as we expand it. So we're going to increase the number of items in the grid from 568 pixels. So we're going to make a media query with the min width 568, and then we're going to target the grid again, portfolio grid. And this time we don't have to change anything else. We're just going to change the grid template columns. So this overwrites the style, the previous styling, and we're going to do repeat to 1FR when we're on 568 pixels wide. So that's here. Look, just right as soon as we hit this point here. So if we go smaller, it jumps back. As soon as we hit 568 pixels, there's now 2 items in each row. And then when we hit I think the next breakpoint we're going to do for the grid is actually 992 pixels, portfolio grid. So we're going to make the grid template columns. We're going to repeat, so we're going to overwrite the previous styling, and we're going to do a repeat of 3 and 1FR. So it's 3 items with all with equal width in the row. So that's 992 pixels. So we hit that point here, and as you can see, we hit a nice 3 layout column there, which is perfect. Okay, so that's the kind of grid aspect already done. That shows how powerful CSS grid is. It's really quick and easy to do, which is perfect. So now we kind of want to focus on the hover effects for each element. So let's maybe leave it at the 568 pixels. So we're now gonna focus on the actual styling of the portfolio item. It may look perfect at the moment, but we still got to just with kind of like where we put the image width to 100%, but we still need to work on this. I don't know why our contents jumped to the top there. Let's scroll back down to the portfolio item. So we need to work on the item, the image wrappers, and the items in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to target the portfolio item, and then we're going to target the image wrapper, which is the div class that wraps around an image. And we're going to do something quite unconventional here, which is a brilliant workaround to a problem that we'll address in a minute. So at the moment, what we're going to do is we are going to put position. In fact, right, let's do a proper demonstration. If I was to have a portfolio item with a different size, so it's rectangular. I know this isn't a portfolio item, but as you can see at the moment, it ruins our layout because it's a slightly different size. And it means that you guys have to import images that are, if you're using this as a portfolio, you'd have to import images that are always square. But instead, what we could do is we can use this workaround so that it doesn't matter what size image, what kind of image is placed into our grid, it will always display as a square. So what we're going to do with the image wrapper is we are going to give it a width of 100%, and we're going to give it a padding bottom of 100%. So what this does is if we ignore the image elements at the moment, if we go to the image wrapper, so we're clicked on the image wrapper, we're hovered over there, zoom in a bit on that so you guys can see it. So we're selecting the image wrapper if we look in the console in Chrome. And if we hover over it, you see the green box. The green box, we're ignoring the image because the image is going to be changed in position in a minute. But the green box there, you can see that the padding bottom of 100%, that basically forces it to be a square. The width of 100%, and then the padding bottom of 100% matches the width. So we've always got a square for our element. So that means basically from there we can then do some custom positioning for our images to make sure it sits on that square and everything else is hidden. So what we're going to do is we are going to now target the image that is the images for the portfolio items. So we're going to remove this because this styling is slightly different now. We're going to do some slightly different layouts. So ignore the fact that they've jumped up large again. So in the image, we're going to actually position it absolute. So this puts it absolute positioned. As you can see, the layout at the moment is horrible, but it will get there. This puts it absolute. So it basically it isn't positioned. The image elements aren't positioned relative to the image wrapper. They're actually they're positioned relative to themselves. But then we can do top left of naught. So I'll always make sure that they're in at the top of the image wrapper and the left of the image wrapper. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a width of 100% and a height of 100%. So this basically forces the image to now fit to the image wrapper square, if we see here. And like we did previously when we had that round image that was stretched on the about section, we can do an object fit of cover, and it will force the image to display nicely in the square. It has the original aspect ratio, and it looks nice. It fits nicely in that section there. So what we're also going to do on here is we're going to do Overflow Hidden. So in case of any kind of overflow of the box, if for some reason some element is overflowing our square box, which we made with the padding bottom of 100%, it's going to be hidden anyway. So this basically forces every item, it doesn't matter if it's a square, rectangle, circle, it forces it to this square layout so it doesn't mess up our grid layout. So what I can do now is I can go back to, now that I've explained that, I can go back to and put it as a normal portfolio item. So that's our images kind of functioned, fit nicely. And now I think what we're going to do is we're going to add some nice hover effects to the item. So what we're going to do is when someone hovers over the portfolio item, so this is when someone hovers over the portfolio item, we are going to target the image inside of the image wrapper. So the original image, we can even just take this out, we can just target the image. So when an item is hovered, we're going to add a transformation to the original, to the image inside there, which is going to make it zoom in like this. So transformations basically allow you to, as they say, transform the element you put in the property on, and the transformation, scale transformation, means that it's just going to make it larger or smaller. So if I wanted it smaller, I could do 0.5 in here. So you see the image is made smaller, but it's done it from a center point, from a direct center point of the element, which is nice. So it's not kind of resizing it, it's not making it larger down to the bottom right here, it's doing it from the center point, which is brilliant, which is exactly what we want. But it's, again, like last time, like we said with all the hover effects on the links, they're not smooth, it's kind of jumping in and out. So what we're going to do is to the image. So we want to do a transition on the original image of 0.5 seconds. We're going to make it slightly longer than the other transitions, so it eases in and out of that transition there, which is really nice. Okay, so that pretty much sorts out the grid layout and the hover effects. But what we want actually is we've got a modal for when we click on an item, and it will create a modal, as we said at the start, and we want to be able to create that modal nicely. So the first thing we're going to do is on the portfolio item is we're going to add a hover effect to it. And we're going to add a cursor or pointer. So that basically lets people know that they can click this link. It's a clickable link, so it's not the original cursor. And then we're going to go back to our index.html, and we're going to create the structure for a modal. So our modal, if we scroll down, what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to the bottom, and we are going to, underneath this, we're going to create a portfolio modal tag to tell us it's the modal. And this modal is basically always going to sit at the bottom of the page. It's not going to get in the way, and it basically dynamically changes the content depending on what image is clicked. So if we click a certain image, it will basically set, it's one modal for every single one of these elements. It just swaps the image out each time. So we're going to code that up now. We're going to create a div with the class portfolio modal. Inside that, we're going to have a close button wrapper because we want a button to close the modal, and we're going to make a button with the class of close button. We're going to use a font awesome icon as well, so we want a font awesome cross. So we're going to make an I tag. We're going to give it a class of FA to say it's font awesome, and then FA times, so that's going to make a cross symbol. So at the moment this is going to appear here, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a display none on the modal and stuff like that, so it's going to be hidden until we click on one of these items in there. So we're going to add that in there, and then we are going to create another div with the class of image wrapper. So this is where our image is going to go inside in the modal. But as I said earlier, we're dynamically adding this. So I'm going to add a little comment code in this for kind of just to let us know that the image we are not adding ourselves. It's being added with JavaScript as we click the relevant portfolio item, and we'll go through the JavaScript in just a second. So let's give it a quick demonstration. So you could, as you saw, I kind of clicked there. You could see that the modal's already working in the background because the JavaScript's already written. But we haven't got any styling. This isn't the way we want a modal to look. But what you can see is, as you click an item, the relevant image is pulled into the modal. So if I click this one, this image is pulled in. If I click this one, this image is pulled in. But that's not how you want a modal to look. You want the modal to pop up over the page. You want the modal to take over the screen. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do some styling for that modal. So what we're going to do, whereabouts do we do it? Let's do it. So we are going to, first of all, we're going to open the tag for it, portfolio modal. And by default, we want a display of none on it. But we'll leave that commented out for now. Because what we really want to do is kind of work out some styling to begin with. So like the header, we're going to give it a position fixed because it needs to be fixed across the whole width of the page. It needs to be in front of us. We're going to so it is always covering the whole page rather than down below like we saw a minute ago. We're going to give it a Z index of 100 because it needs to be above every other element when we click on it. We're going to give it a top of 0 and a left of 0, so that means it starts on the top left of the page. But then we're going to give it a width of 100%. So the modal is going to have the whole full width of the page. And we are also going to give it a height of 100 view height. So it's going to cover the whole view height of the page. And that should already be here. So if we give it a background color of red. There we are. So it's finally come in there. So if we give it a background color of red, you can see the modal is already here. It's just that we've got no content for it. So if I do that, I think the best way to probably show it is actually doing a background. Let's give it an Rgba. Let's do 0, 155, 0, and then 0.5. So if you aren't aware, Rgba means it's looking for RGB colors. And then the A stands for, I can't remember what this A stands for, I believe it's alpha. So basically with the alpha, if it's set to 1, it's got 100% opacity. If it's set lower, it changes the opacity of the color. So as you can see, basically, I just wanted to demonstrate that the modal was covering the whole page, the actual kind of background of the modal, which is what we wanted. It's covering the whole page. But we don't want it to have this red color. We do want to use Rgba, but we want it to be like a dark kind of overlay. So we're going to make it 0, 0, 0. So that's black for RGB for black. And then the alpha is going to be 0.8. So you can see when the modal is active, which it is at the moment because we haven't displayed, we've got the display none commented out. You can kind of tell that the rest of the page is kind of in the background. It's not active. So that's brilliant. That's what we kind of want with our modal. And then we're going to work on the button next as well. So portfolio modal close button. It's going to be positioned absolute. It's going to be in the right hand corner we want it. So we're going to put right all the way over there. So it's appeared over there already. We're going to add a big font size to it so we can see it a bit clearer straight away. And then we want a border of none. We want a background color of none or transparent. And then we want to make the actual color of it light. So we can use our light variable there. So there you are, there's a button there. And we're going to add it some padding, 10 pixels, 15 pixels to bring it out of that corner so it's not stuck right in the corner. Okay, so let's refresh the page quickly as well. There you are. So we've got, the nice button here. So what we want is, by default, as we said, we want the portfolio modal to display none. We want it to be hidden. And then what we do is when we click on it, you can see we've still got to do some styling for the images, but the portfolio item appears thanks to the JavaScript, which we'll go through in a second. So it's pretty much already working quite nicely. We just need to really position these images and make sure they're not too large and make sure they don't take over the screen. So we're going to now focus on the portfolio modal and the image wrapper. We're going to give that a position of relative. So this is the div element that contains the image. We're going to give it a height of, let's go calc, 100 view height minus 100 pixels. So basically, it's not quite covering the whole height of the element. It's 100 pixels, so it's got 50 pixels. We're going to have 50 pixels at the top, 50 pixels at the bottom for the image wrapper. And then we're going to go width. We're going to do the same. We can use calc. So calc is quite modern as well in terms of CSS. It allows us to use percentages and combine them with kind of pixels and make some cool calculations out of there. And then, so like we said, we're not having it right at the top or right at the bottom, so we're going to have left 50 pixels and then top 50 pixels. And then we're going to give this display a flex because we want the image inside of this image wrapper to be centered, both vertically and horizontally. So we can do justify content at the center, align items center. So that kind of gives us the nice wrapper for our image. And then, excuse me, and then we go to the portfolio modal, and then we go to the image wrapper, and then for the image, we are going to have a max height of 100%. So basically this means that it will never overflow this container. It will never be bigger than the person's screen. We don't want that happening. We want a width of auto. So the width is kind of relevant to the height in this case. And then a max width of 100% again, so that the height doesn't the height doesn't allow for a too big a width. I should say. Okay, so we could even do height auto in there as well, which should allow for the height to be corrected as well when possible. So basically, this means that let's remove that actually for now. This means that we get a nice modal. It's centered. The image is centered in the modal, and it works across different screen sizes as well. So if we bring down the screen size, bring up the screen size, you can see that it never is bigger than the screen size, which is perfect. So that pretty much sums up the modal actual code elements. The only thing I want to do to this section, I think that brings up our kind of code area here, is I want to add some extra padding to the portfolio section. So a media min width 768 pixels. We're going to give it the whole portfolio section larger padding, and that's pretty much it. Just some finishing touches. So we've got some bigger padding depending on the screen size. We can now see that our link is going active as we're over the portfolio section, which is perfect. And then now it basically comes back to explaining the functionality for the modal. So let's have a look where that is. So this one, again, so like I said, I wrote the JavaScript beforehand, so you didn't have to bog you guys down with something slightly more complex. It's not overly complex at all, but it's slightly more complex when this is a beginner HTML and CSS course. So I thought I'd cover the JavaScript for you guys. So what's happening is when a portfolio item is clicked, what it's doing is then looking for inside the relevant, basically a portfolio item is clicked, it then finds the image from inside that portfolio item. So it finds the image, and what it does is it adds, it basically removes the old portfolio modal. So it then removes the content from the image wrapper in the portfolio modal in case there was already an image in there. And then it adds the relevant image to the portfolio modal. So what this does is these two lines here, or these 4 lines including the comment, basically are adding the image tag inside this image wrapper. So if I right click that, if I inspect it on Chrome, you can see as I click a relevant image, it brings the image tag, it brings the image into this is the portfolio modal, it brings the image tag in. So if I change whatever image I click on, it changes the image to like portfolio item 4 or whatever. So that's what those 2 lines are doing. It's removing the old images, removing the old image and adding a new one. And then it simply, it basically shows the modal, because by default the modal is hidden. So it uses a fade in, which gives it that nice fade animation. And it also adds a class of no scroll to the body, which we haven't actually set up. So this body adding a no scroll, basically the problem we have at the moment is if the modal's open, if you look in the background is still scrolling. What we want to do is we want to create some styling to make sure that doesn't happen. So in the global styles, let's do it under the original body here then. When the body, because what the JavaScript is doing is when a modal is active, it is adding a class of no scroll. So if you see the class jump around there. So when the body has the class of no scroll, we want to add an overflow of hidden to the body. So that basically stops the scrolling. So now I'm scrolling my wheel, but nothing's happening. I can't scroll anywhere, which is what we want. So basically once the modal is open, it's scrolling. And then when you click away from the modal or even click the escape key, so we've got something here saying it to close the modal. So if we click anywhere on the page, we can close the modal. Or down here, if we click on the escape button, this bit of code here is telling it to escape, is telling it to close the modal and also remove that no scroll class so we can scroll again. So that pretty much sums up the portfolio section. We've got some nice styling in there. So if we go and view our project on the largest screen over here, we can now see that we've got our nice about section and we've got a nice portfolio section which is fully working with our modals. So if we look on a full desk, this is us looking at a nice desktop size. So basically we finish off that kind of portfolio section, which is slightly bulkier than the rest of the sections in there. So I think what we'll do is we'll end this episode here. We'll bring that to a close. And this can be another section done. And I think on the next one, we'll look at finishing off the whole document. We've got, if we go to the final product here, and in the next episode, we'll look at the service boxes. We'll do this kind of the skill area, which is quite a nice section there, the contact section, and then just a really basic footer. So I think we'll finish that off in the next video. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, as usual, if you've got any questions or you need any help, just put it in the comments below. I'll answer any questions that come up, and I'm sure people who are viewing the video might be able to help out too. Okay, guys, so thank you very much for watching this episode, and I'll catch you again shortly.